Undercutting a story with a purpose. To Kill a Mockingbird. In the town of Maycomb sat the Radley house. The house was low, was once white with a deep front porch and green shutter, but had long ago darkened to the color slate gray yard around it. Rain-rotted shingles drooped over the eaves of the veranda. Oak trees kept the sun away. The remains of a picket drunkenly guarded the front yard, a swept yard that was never swept where Johnson grass and rabbit tobacco grew in abundance. In that house lived a malevolent phantom. People of town stated that it existed. They said it went out when the moon is down and stared in people's windows. People's flowers froze when it breathed on them. And stealthy small crimes such as household pets found mutilated were examples of its work. No one went near the house, not even adults out of fear. Boo Radley, the ghost of this house, is a pale white man. Scratch that!
He definitely wasn't white. If I remember correctly, Boo Radley was a her, a black woman with a lack of voice. I had had experiences with her in the past. She would often leave strange wood carvings that resembled warped faces and dead insects like cicadas. Some of the children in town had told us that they had seen these things in the tree, but were too scared to retrieve them. Interested, Jem and I would gather the items that appeared in the hollowed-out oak tree in front of the Radley house. Knowing Boo, it was definitely to lure us closer to the house. Why else would she put those curious objects there? That catch the attention of children.
One night, when Miss Maudie's house had lit up in flames, Atticus, my father, had instructed Jem and I to wake up and head outside. Dressed in only our pajamas, we sat across from the burning house. I can hear the adults talk as they wait for the fire to be put out. Miss Maudie said she saw a black face staring through her window before the fire had started. There is no one way that the fire had started. The only person in this town is that evil Boo Radley. We can't trust those blacks. She is crazy. It must have been true, since adults are much more older and wiser than I am. So, I guess it must be true. While waiting on the sidewalk, since it was quite early in the morning, I had taken it upon myself that I fell asleep. When I had awoken, I realized that a blanket had been drooped around me. I asked the others if they had placed it there, to which they responded, no. Since it was still dark out, it must have been Boo. I've heard that blacks were evil. Her motive must have been to lead me to a false sense of security.
The last time I had seen Boo before her arrest is when she murdered Bob Ewell. Jem and I were walking home in the dark when Jem was attacked by a mysterious figure. I was dazed from running around in circles since it was too dark to see. To my surprise, I saw a mysterious figure carrying Jem around the corner under the light of the street lamp. His arm is dangling crazily in front of him. By the time I reached the door, the figure reached out front yard. Atticus called the sheriff and a doctor, and I was rambled by many questions. When the sheriff came, he told us that Bob Ewell had been stabbed. I hadn't even known that he was there. Maybe he was stabbed before we got there. No one was in the scene aside from us and Boo. From what I've seen, what people said about Boo must be true. From these events, everyone's conclusions must have been the same like mine.
I had been left to scratch out what really did happen on the jail walls. Being mute left me with no voice to argue what really did happen. I remember what I left in the hollow of the tree, traditional gifts from my culture, wooden statues of women's faces, and dead bugs that bring out good luck. This is part of my culture. This is part of my blackness. I had no intention to lure the children. My intentions were good. The other children were kept in fear by their parents' teachings. Blacks are bad. Blacks are bad. Blacks are bad. To them, I cannot be trusted.
One thing they said is true. I like to come out at night. No one can judge you when they are in their bed asleep. It is safer for me at this time. However, the night that Miss Maudie's house had burned down, I could hear the rumors start up. She tells how she saw me at her windows. She must have been crazy. Like I spent all night staring at her. Her house burned down through no fault of my own. Ha! Serve yourself for being prejudiced.
I saw Scout sleeping from my window. As a kind gesture, I wrapped her up in a blanket. As I said before, my intentions are good. As I look out of my window, I see a white man carrying a knife. He doesn't seem like a man simply strolling in the night. Out of curiosity, I followed him, lurking in the darkness. As I continued to follow him, I saw 2 children, the same ones that I look out for, Jem and Scout. I then realized what the man intended to do, but it was too late. He rushed little Jem and attempted to stab Scout. I jumped in between and forced his own knife into him. In that moment, I knew who he was, Bob Ewell. Jem was lying on the ground, arm limp. In an act of courage, I picked him up and carried him to his house, out in the presence of people for the first time in a long time. Atticus led me in the house, and I stayed in the corner of a quiet room. I always try to assume the best in people, that they may somehow act without prejudice against me. I hope that they would see, through my actions, that I was not to blame. I was just trying to help.
As I try to finish up my story, I look out of my cell window. I reminisce on my intentions and realize how unfair and prejudiced the world is. In my case, I can only do wrong because of the color of skin. The people have only made opinions about me than knowing my true self.